Hi, folks. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome to this new episode of the Riseup Radio. And today we have two lovely ladies with us, sharing their insights. I'm going to talk a little bit about them, but they will introduce themselves because I don't think I'll do justice to that. So today we have with us Stela Lupushor and Dr. Solange Charas. Stella has been transforming workplace practice across decades of her career at the intersection of tech and human-centric design. And she's also the co-author of two books, Humanizing Human Capital and Humans at Work. Stella, I hope I got the names correct.
Right.
Awesome. And Solange has been working with organizations in various roles, including as a consultant and CHRO over decades to create effective human capital solutions, including SaaS-based approaches to optimize returns. And she's currently working with the new generation of HR professionals in the capacity of professor of practice at Columbia University and her own consulting practice, HCMoneyball. And it's a very, very nice name, Solange. We'll talk more about that as well.
Thank you.
So, welcome to this episode of the Rise Up Radio. Can I invite you to talk a little bit about your work, respectively, and then we'll talk about the topic today and dig deeper into that.
Absolutely. I can start. So
Go ahead, Stella.
I come more from a similarly to Solange, and she will share more about her own background, but I come more from a quantitative background, and I ended up in HR by chance, and I never looked back because I found the space where I can relate to the work I do. And technology is an enabler. People analytics is an enabler to identify opportunities to improve the workplace experience for all of us workers because we can um, easily find processes that do not work. We can easily find opportunities for automation. We can find patterns in the data that can identify intervention points for creating new practices, to bring new policies, to automate certain things. So it's a natural place to bring that quantitative mindset and uh, improve the mindset of not only managers but also HR practitioners in improving workplace experience. So I do a lot of consulting myself. I do advisory work with a bunch of startups and VC funds because that's where a lot of innovation is happening and it helps my consulting work. And I also teach at NYU a class on digital workplace design to help the next generation of HR leaders embrace the same type of mindset. So that's about me, Solange.
Awesome.
So, like Stella, I ended up in HR by accident. I have an undergrad degree in
Same.
international political economy. Yeah, well, that's what happens. An MBA in accounting and finance and a PhD in corporate governance. So, you can see how they're all tangential to human capital. But I ended up again in HR by accident. My first job post MBA was at a consulting firm called the Hay Group. And I actually fell in love with the process of consulting. And what I brought to the discipline was my accounting and financial background, which has basically been my context ever since, is bringing that kind of discipline and rigor around numbers to the function, to understanding the impact and effectiveness of the function. And that's what I do. That's my context, my come from, and the title of the book that Stella and I wrote together is called Humanizing Human Capital. Invest in your people for optimal business returns.
Yeah.
And what my interest and also Stella's interest is to not just understand HR for HR's purpose, but to understand HR as a driver of sustainable business success. The language
Right.
of business is a financial language, which HR people don't speak for the most part. And that's also my goal, is to teach the next generation of HR professionals both financial and data literacy. So
Right.
HR people being able to use those tools to understand how to optimize the return on investment in people. So we believe, which is why we called the book Humanizing Human Capital, we believe that data and data analytics is actually very humanizing to the function, despite what HR people think, data and data analytics dehumanizes the function. And what we say in the book is the only way to be able to understand the signals that are produced or generated in HR is through data analytics. And better understanding the signals is very democratizing, so that we're not just
Right.
listening to the squeaky wheel. We're actually understanding the performance and the experience of all segments of the HR demographic, so that
Right.
we can make better decisions that impact more people in a positive way than just a segment of the people that are noisy. So
Awesome. So
that's
cool.
about
Thank
me.
you. Thank you. Thank you for taking me through your journeys. And I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion today. And folks, the topic that we have picked today to discuss with Stella and Solange is about future of work and AI. Well, given the age we are in, we cannot ignore AI as a topic. It's basically the next big thing that everyone is talking about. Every board meeting that you go probably has this inevitable question, right? So, what's our AI strategy? And companies are rushing to upskill or reskill their workforces to get more done by fewer and fewer people. Some of them are looking at it from an excitement perspective, where others are anxious at, looking at redundancies, right? So, as for both of you, what are we thinking of this change? So, just to get the conversation started, what would you highlight as the top three trends that are taking over workplaces at the moment when it comes to future of work and AI?
I would start with thinking through the lens of several opportunities, right? Because there are opportunities at the macro level, right? Every company can create products, and we've seen different business models emerging. You have a company that created this cursor AI that became
Yeah.
within a matter of a year, went from 1 million valuation to 100 million valuation with less than 20 people, right? So you have these companies that no longer need to have significant assets or significant workforce to become really,
Powerful.
Big,
powerful.
powerful, big, yeah.
Exactly. So it's new type of business models, new types of companies that are emerging, that are taking advantage of the AI capabilities with very little workforce. There is new opportunities to improve organizational efficiency. So this is a second layer of opportunities for AI. And think about optimization of your supply chain. Think about optimization of your financial operations. Think about optimization of your HR data, and creating a different way of analyzing patterns, connecting different data sources. All of the things that typically individuals would spend days and days, sifting through and figuring out what they're seeing. Now you have algorithms that can process those massive amounts of data and be able to give you insights, be able to make sense of what you're seeing. And I'm commenting not on AI, since a lot of people are lately talking about AI in the context of generative AI. I'm speaking to the broader types of
Yeah.
AI models, not just generative ones. And then if you think about AI at the personal productivity level, so that's the third category of opportunities where you can use AI for your own optimization of your daily activities, to get that first draft started, to get your analysis done for certain data or report that you need to produce, accelerate your learning development. So I think there is a lot of nuances that companies need to start thinking really deeply, because this is one of those foundational technologies that can unleash significant amount of productivity, efficiencies, business opportunities, but it requires a very different way of organizing work. And
True.
We can dive deeper into the impact on the
We
workers
will.
and management, etc. later.
Right.
Let's
So,
start with the
Solange, over to you. Would love to hear your thoughts, and maybe you want to share something as well with our audience.
Yeah, I also, like Stella, think about this from a multivariate perspective. So at the macro level, these tools, both AI and generative AI, and the reason that I think about them as two unique categories is AI is generally only accessible to people who understand the programming part of it, right? The large language model. Generative AI is very democratizing. Everybody can access generative AI. At some companies, I have a client firm that actually blocks any generative AI tool internally. So, if you're working at the company through their website or through their portal, you can't access any of the generative AI tools. But I think that we need to think about this, as Stella says, from lots of different levels. So, of course, the first level is, how can this impact in a positive way, or at least mitigate the risk from a negative perspective, the organization in general? And AI has been around for a long time. It's just not been accessible by the mass employee population.
True.
And one thing that, at the beginning, Stella and I said, generative AI is not going to take your job, especially if you learn how to use generative AI as part of your job. And then our thinking evolved a little bit to say that there are certain jobs that can be completely replaced by generative AI. So even if you learn how to use it, you're not going to be safe. But the thing that we know today is that AI and generative AI cannot do what a human can do related to judgment and decision making. All it can do is synthesize a lot of information very quickly and provide input for effective decision making that needs to be done by humans. For the moment, I'm sure that at some point in time, generative AI will develop so that it can exercise judgment, and then we're all in trouble. Because the one thing that differentiates humans from digital workforce is the ability to exercise judgment and make decisions that humans can make better than computers, because of the way that our brains are designed and the way that judgment works. So at the macro level, we need to think about how we can augment our workforce so that we become more efficient, more productive with the humans that we have in our employ. And the thing that I always like to keep in mind from a macro perspective is that 87% of the US GDP is generated through services. And at this point in time, the majority of those services has to be produced or delivered through humans, not through a digital workforce. I'm sure that's going to shift at some point in time. But what I say to my clients who think about job reductions, headcount reductions, is, especially if your product or service is delivered through humans, that cutting headcount is the same as draining gas out of your car and then expecting your car to get you to your destination. So cutting people from your organization and expecting to generate revenue or to have market share is not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's the same
Correct.
analogy. You are
Correct.
draining the organization of the source of productivity and revenue.
Right. Right.
And the way that
So,
I bring that home for financial people is to say, think about the relationship between how much you pay somebody and the productivity they're producing for you.
the
So I had
output, yeah.
and
Yeah.
CFOs don't think of it that way. They think of it as an
Yeah.
expense, not
Right.
as a driver of value creation. So I had this client, they paid people on average $85,000 a year. And on average, those people were generating $275,000 of revenue. And when we talked about productivity, I could see the CFO thinking, well, I can go to my board and say, oh, we have even higher productivity when we cut heads, right? Because formula is revenue divided by head count.
Correct.
So if you reduce the denominator, the quotient becomes bigger. And I said, don't go there. And he was a little flustered. And I said, you should be thinking, how many people at $85,000 a year can I hire to produce $275,000 per person?
Correct.
The ratio is about 1.8 to 1.9.
Yeah.
So instead of, and this was a pure service organization. So we have to think about the revenue and the expense part of the model when we think about people. Oh,
I
so
get that.
that's the macro. And then at the micro level, I'll just do this really quickly. I don't think organizations have yet begun to redesign jobs based on augmented tasks through AI. And I recently gave a presentation to a aerospace industry organization. And if you let me, if you allow me to share,
please.
So what I did is, and thank you to generative AI, because I use generative AI to create this. Basically looking at a standard job with 10 accountabilities, the percent of the time that's spent for each one of these tasks. What part of the job can be augmented by generative AI or AI, right? And how many hours you'd save if you allow a non-destructive tester, an NDT, to integrate generative AI in their job. So I identified the tasks that are augmented by AI, but more importantly, I identified the risks that still need a human in the loop to be able to perform that task effectively. We can't just like seed it to generative AI. We still need a human in the loop. And you can see that about 30% of the job can be augmented, which means that we're freeing up of a standard 2,080 hour a year job. We are freeing up 630 hours. So then the question becomes,
what happens to the 630 hours, right?
Exactly. What do you do with that job? And how do you make that job more productive? How do you make that job have a greater experience for the incumbent so that they don't leave, so that they're still engaged in the work, so that they have time to think and be innovative? And so that's the question I think that HR professionals and senior leadership is going to have to address sometime in the near future, which is, do we just work people to death, or do we use that time more constructively in terms of investing in people?
I think different companies in the past have taken this approach already also, right? I mean, companies there are that say that, hey, 20% of your time, do some innovative work outside of your job description, right? So some companies have already taken that lead and they've done that. Now, there are other set of companies who are finding this new bandwidth, and they could think about increasing productivity and, like you said, push their people till death or help them think and innovate further. I think that's a bigger mindset shift that we're talking about, because if that mindset shift had been there, then they might have done it already. Yes, no, your thoughts, Stella?
I think there are a lot of things that need to be imagined. If
Correct.
you think about the legal framework and regulatory framework, we don't have any yet at the
Hmm.
broader level. And
True.
even some of the, things that were in existence are changing on a daily basis, and they're not
Right.
consistent around the world. So it is work in progress. A lot of financial underpinnings, right, are not accounting for a lot of value that gets created. What is
Hmm.
the definition of the value that gets created by AI and how we
Yeah.
distribute it,
Correct.
and who gets the benefits of this value that gets created? We look at some of the companies, right? There's now a speculation that there will be models released that will cost $20,000 a month. Well, what is the trade-off, right? You get a model that costs $20,000 a month as opposed to having a human that costs $80,000 a year. I don't know. Is there a financial benefit in investing in the two? So I think there are a lot of questions that will take time
Yeah.
to shake
Hmm.
shake off during, for the foreseeable future as the development of this technology accelerates and new models get released on a weekly basis.
Hmm.
And I think that's the difference between this technology and other previous technologies, that it's so fast
The
that
speed
humans,
is
yeah,
unimaginable, right? The speed of
yes,
development of the technology has been so rapid that you can't even predict what's going to happen in 6 months' time, right? The newer model is going to come, the thinking is going to be much better, the logical reasoning is going to be much better. And so, like you were saying, maybe, who knows how far is that decision-making capability that is there, right? And even if you look at the current models that are there, they have I'm not going to throw numbers, but they have good reasoning capabilities better than a lot of humans do when they look at data, when they are able to connect different data points and make inferences and logical arguments out of it, right? If I take my own example as a founder, in the last 9 to 12 months, my productivity has changed rapidly in terms of what I can do as a founder. And a very good example that came out of it was I ended up designing a new product while working on an existing product, right?
yep,
Uh, 1 year
Yeah,
ago,
because
that
you
was
had the time.
unimaginable.
You had the time.
Exactly.
It freed
But
up
I also had the
630 hours for
thinking
you.
capability. But I also had the thinking capability, Solange, because I had a capability with me which probably was an augmenting capability which was not present in my team at the moment. So I was able to do some very quick R&D or prototyping and show the proof of concept and then turn it into a product rapidly as well. Right.
Yeah.
The core question remains that okay, smaller organizations might come up with innovative products and newer products and boost the economy, but what happens at the larger organizations, right? Their top line isn't increasing as rapidly as saying that hey, we have 30% of our workforce is more productive now, and we can use that 30% extra productivity to create, let's say, 40% extra revenue because market isn't there to consume their demand, right? And
Yeah,
maybe then naturally they go back to reducing the workforce.
and what big
Question to you.
companies do is they buy those small companies because it's more economical for them to buy than build for the
Yeah.
most part, right? So and that's the strategy that a lot of tech companies have used,
Hmm.
is that it's easier to buy a company that has a whole bunch of engineers in it than to hire
Correct.
them one by one, right?
Correct.
And that's the noblesse oblige of the large company, is that it has
Hmm.
the wherewithal to be able to buy the small company. And, we need to think about, you asked, how do companies make decisions? And I think it boils down to their fundamental philosophy of people over profit or profit over people.
Correct.
And that's going to be the guiding philosophy. If you really care about people and you think that they're important in your value chain, then you make decisions
Hmm.
differently than if you just care about profit, because profit is short term, people are long term. So where are you in the game?
Right. Stella, what do you think?
I think we're in an era of significant turmoil on so many levels. I think there is a lot of uncertainty at the political level, economic level, and of course, there will be domino effects of a lot of regime changes that we're seeing, be that tariffs or different polarities around the world that emerge.
Yep.
And I think we're seeing that reality that is being compounded by AI capabilities acceleration. And unfortunately, I worry that ultimately the regular workers will suffer at the end. I hope we're not looking at a significant recession, but maybe you're catching me on a day when post the significant drop in the market that happened yesterday. So I'm a little bit more pessimistic about the future. But I do hope that AI will create or will enable people with ideas and creativity to create value for themselves. I do hope that the younger generation will take advantage of these possibilities, and they have a different way of looking at the world, different way of using this technology to reimagine new products, reimagine solving different problems. So I'm pessimistic in the short term, but optimistic in the long term. I know this is not an answer. It's the state of the world that I'm reacting to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the fact, that's a reality as well. So very, very apt, right? But let's talk about future of work in this entire scenario, right? What do organizations do, right? And we talked about reimagining jobs, right? If somebody has to start thinking about reimagining jobs today, I mean, they should have ideally started maybe a year or two ago, but let's say we're starting today. How do we get started? What do we do, right? Because we are basically in an era where there are no playbooks. And I was having this conversation a couple of weeks back with Steve. He's the first CHRO of LinkedIn, and he's now the ex-CHRO of LinkedIn. And he said the statement that, we are actually entering or in an era where there are no playbooks at all, right? Because all the playbooks that have been there are playbooks from an era where we all sit in office and work together, right? And that is out with COVID, and we don't know how to perform and how to work, right? So what does future of work look like? How do jobs get reimagined, and how do companies adapt to this new reality now?
So I have a framework. I call it 4 Ws: work, workforce, workplace, and worth. So we need to reimagine what is the work, what is the essence of what needs to get done. So not look at it through the lens of jobs, because the jobs are constructs that are somewhat limiting. And by the time you try to hire somebody to do the job, that job description is already outdated, as opposed to trying to think what is the problem that needs to be solved, what are the activities that need to be done, and how can you find the workforce that can do that in the most optimal way. And the workforce is no longer just regular employee or a contingent worker. It can be a lot more complex mix of workers that can be, yes, regular employees, contingent workers, but it can be a team.
Even AI workers. Even AI workers, right?
Exactly. It can be acqui-hires. It can be, consulting firms. It can be a retention bonus for 2 years to help get the work done and then let them go. So there are a lot of techniques and mechanisms to bring people to get the work done. Workplace also matters because you can create an environment where people can get their best work done. And it doesn't mean that it's 5 days a week in the office, right? It can be a mix of, be that office environment, be that in virtual reality, right? What is the best environment to get that work done by those workers? And then what is the value exchange? What is the worth, right? Some people will choose a lower pay because it provides them the flexibility to work from home. Some people want to attain self-transcendence, right? what is the work that will allow them and the
Yeah.
workplace environment that will allow them to attain that. Not everybody expects the same thing from the workplace environment. And now we have the data, we have the capability to personalize that. So how can we solve this optimization problem
Yeah.
to really deliver on that promise and create that value proposition that people expect from the workplace? So that's pretty much the problem that
That's
the
a good
HR
framework. That's a solid framework, by the way. Yeah.
And, what Stela's talking about is a systematic way of thinking about how do we define these variables? How do we optimize the workers, their input, their impact, right? And do it in a way that optimizes the return on investment in people. And it's interesting because Stela is usually talking about the humanizing stuff, and I'm talking about the data and the return
Data.
on investment. At this time, she talked about that, and I'm going to talk about the human part. So,
Yeah.
the natural challenge is that humans don't like change. We're built in a way for consistency, for status quo.
Correct.
We
Correct.
like predictability. We're uncomfortable with the unknown. And change triggers a response in human beings, right? That has to be overcome when change is introduced and managed in any process. So we're talking about changing the organization. We're talking about changing jobs, changing the nature of jobs. We're talking about changing the way we measure how well people are doing in jobs, right? So all that change comes with resistance, and organizations that are not managing change effectively and appropriately are going to fail. It's as simple as that.
It's very simple. Yeah.
Look at Kodak. Just did
And
not
it doesn't matter how big the organization is going to be. If they are actually resistant to change, they are going to fail big time. No doubt about that.
So organizations have to not only orchestrate and manage the change, and the change is happening all the time, right? So we've got all sorts of different models to look at change management, Cotter's model and Littman's model, and lots of models. But what they all address is the resistance to change. And resistance to change has to be managed. And the way that I like to think about it is through Mauer's 3 levels of resistance, because it's the easiest way to think about it. The first level of resistance is, I don't get it. So employees say, I don't get it. Markets say, I don't get it, right? And to overcome that resistance, you have to provide information, facts, figures, and ideas. That's where the data analytics comes in, right? Data analytics is the antidote to chaos. Level 2 is, I don't like it, which is an emotional reaction or emotional response to the change, which is inherent, right? And so what you need to do is actually show the what's in it for me, what's in it for you about the change, that you'll have 630 hours that we can craft, that we can design in a way to make your job more interesting, to have you have more job satisfaction. Maybe we'll make you go to training. Maybe we give you a little bit more free time to be innovative and to solve problems, or to participate in committees where you can have an impact, where you can contribute your knowledge and your ideas. So the level 2 is I don't like it, which we have to overcome with an emotional plea or an emotional response to the resistance that people naturally have. And the third level is called I don't like you, which is really around trust and confidence, where we have to walk the talk and talk the talk for organizations to be trusted by the employees. And so all of that really is in Stela's realm, which is around behavioral change, which is around, all the human part of managing people. And we need to do both. We can't just design change and design jobs and design new ways of doing things based on AI that's based not just on tasks, but on impact or results. But we
Right.
also have to take the human side of it into account so that when we are designing these changes, we are taking humans into consideration in terms of how to best orchestrate the change so that people don't leave you, so that people don't check out, because that's what happens. People just check
Correct.
out. So I think, if for organizations to be successful in adapting to what's happening both externally, because they have to adapt to the market conditions,
Yep.
they also need to think about how they're going to prepare the organization and manage the organization through this
Correct.
change. And change is constant, right?
Yep.
It's
And more rapid now. I mean, more rapid and
much
more
more rapid.
frequent.
And yet humans are
Yep.
still not better at adapting to change than they were 100 years ago.
Correct.
Maybe we
Correct.
understand it, but emotionally, we
Yeah,
still work the same way.
that's true. So, I'm coming towards the last segment of this episode today, and since a lot of our audience is our managers themselves, right? I want to talk about the role of managers in this new age and era. What happens to them? How does their role change, right? Decision making is aided, but people management and emotional competence cannot be brought in by the machines, right? But in a nutshell, how do managers look at their roles in organizations with such a diverse workforce, with humans as well as digital workers? So, Stella, would you like to go first?
I'll give one more W, orchestration. So it is the role of orchestrating work across both humans and digital workers. It's a
Hmm.
increasingly different type of role you need to play. It's no longer, task management. It's not that you need to understand the depth of what needs to get done. It's really the ability to understand the macro level of that problem solving and being able to allocate the activities in a
Correct.
really correct way and smart ways. Like who is the most
Yeah.
optimal worker for this activity, and where is the worker potential, and how
Hmm.
can you motivate? How can you encourage? Can you coach them through the problem-solving activities, through their development and growth, such that they can do the work of their life, right? It's more about that nurturing role that they can play on one side, and then solving the business problem on the other
Yeah.
side. I will venture to guess that there will probably be fewer managers and
Hmm.
more than
Yeah.
we've seen at the moment.
Hmm.
And I think that would be an interesting change to observe. On one side, being a manager was a pathway towards the leadership.
Hmm.
Like how do you become a senior leader if you don't have
Correct.
the pathway and the transition to really grow in your
Correct.
career and have more and more complex
Correct.
activities and layers to build that capability. So that'll be an interesting challenge for HR to tackle. But I think that
Yeah.
orchestration is really
So
the
really interesting. So basically, what I hear you say is, it's gonna get more softer rather than harder, right? I
yeah.
mean, they're gonna move more towards the leadership side of things rather than task orientation side of things, right? I think that's where the core role of managing people managers is gonna change primarily, which is becoming better at managing people, humans, more and more, no?
I think the model that uh, probably Solange and I similarly had in our consulting lives, where you had a project manager who was
Hmm.
about the tasks, and then you
Hmm.
had a coach. So you had a
Hmm.
person who was part of your practice that was responsible for your career development,
Yep.
that you could go, have conversations about your career that will help you think through what's next for you, what skills you need to develop, how you get to the next promotion, whatever it is that matters to
Yep.
you and your. So I think that kind of it's the type
Hmm.
of division, not
Yep.
merged for
Yep.
the two.
Solange,
Uh,
over to you.
I think that the manager role is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I say that is I think about what's going on from an extrinsic perspective. The demographic of the workforce
Mm-hmm.
is changing.
Mm-hmm.
This year, from what I understand, we are going to have the greatest number of people, of baby boomers, leave the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
They're of retirement age, and who the hell wants to work in this
Right.
economy anyway? And they may actually need to, because the last time we had a big surge of potential retirements was at the 2008, 2009 recession, where the baby boomers actually put off, the first wave of the baby boomers put off their retirement. Now the
Yeah.
last wave of the baby boomers are, I mean, if we do fall into a recession, it's going to change. But
Mm-hmm.
even with baby boomers, either retiring or deferring retirement, about 19% of the US workforce is filled by foreigners,
Mm-hmm.
many of who are, especially in the agricultural segment, are going to
Mm-hmm.
be deported.
Yeah.
Um, Trump is not allowing foreigners to come into this country to work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and even with the 2 million federal workers that have lost their jobs, it's still not
Yeah.
enough to fill the open positions that we currently
Right.
have.
Right.
So I don't think the manager role is going away. I think the manager role is going to transform into maybe a hybrid role that looks like
Mm-hmm.
individual manager.
Mm-hmm.
So because we just don't have enough, even at the
Right.
college level, we're not producing enough people to fill the jobs that are going to become vacant.
Right.
Baby boomers, we'll assume that the baby boomers are holding manager or senior manager roles. When they go
Correct.
out, they be
Correct.
backfilled, which leaves a
Yeah.
big empty level of the
Gap at
organization
the bottom. Yeah. Correct.
that can be filled from the bottom. But like, look at nursing.
Mm.
We already have 500,000 nurses shortage. And the nursing schools aren't producing enough. They're not delivering enough graduate nurses
Mm.
to fill these roles. And
Mm.
the demographic of the nursing population, the demographic is mostly baby boomers.
Right. Right.
There's going to be a huge redesign,
Redesign,
realignment.
realignment of a lot of functions in
Yeah.
industries.
And I think what doesn't happen enough at the senior management level is understanding labor as the input into the business model.
Mm.
I think that a lot of the senior leaders that we have running companies today, not the startups, but mid and large size companies, have an assumption that there will always be people to fill open jobs.
Right. Right.
And I think that is a risk that is not being addressed.
Mm.
And if you look at the most recent conference board survey on CEOs, they say the most important thing around humans is agility, flexibility, right? They're talking about
Correct.
things that are about human nature and not about the lack of talent to make their companies run.
Yeah.
So at the same time, and Stella and I have written about this, at the same time that we're seeing a contraction in the labor supply, we're seeing the rise of AI and generative AI. So it's happening perfectly timed.
At the timely level, right? Yep.
Just as we need augmented workforce because we don't
Right.
have enough workers, we have this technology that is
Right.
able to augment workers. Now we have to do it responsibly. We have to do it
Yeah.
mindfully. And I think the smart companies are going to be the ones that actually unpack labor as an input into the business model and think about it from a risk mitigation perspective.
And do it more proactively, rather than reactively.
Do it more proactively. And I declared 2025 as the year that I'm going to focus on strategic workforce planning. And I truly believe that if companies are doing strategic workforce planning the right way, the time to fill any job other than the entry-level job and the executive-level job should be 1 week, no more.
Not bad.
Because companies, like I hear stories about companies where it's taking them 120, 230,
Yeah.
80 days to fill an open job. And what they don't
Right.
realize is when you've got an open job, you have no productivity in that role.
You're losing dollars daily.
And they lose the revenue opportunity. They lose
Correct.
the economic value creating potential of that
Correct.
role being filled, because every role in the company is a client server, even the
Totally.
internal roles. They
Totally.
serve somebody in the company or outside of the company that in turn creates value either indirectly or directly. And so what, we're on a mission is to reframe human capital as an economic value creator for organizations in the minds of CEOs and CFOs primarily, because they think of HR as an expense. And the SEC has even said HR is an investment in an intangible asset. So without
Always.
HR people, you don't have companies. I haven't seen a company yet that can be successful without people. I don't know, Stella, have you seen a purely digital company? No.
Well, Cursor, 20 people, but you still need 20 people to do it.
Yeah.
You'll need 20 people.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to the point yet, and maybe this is sort of dystopian, where companies are running without humans.
Yes, maybe one day, maybe not. All right.
And then
So maybe on that
what do we
note,
worry about?
sorry, Solange, I think we're running out of time. I know we have a lot of thoughts to share, but we're running out of time. And on that note, folks, we're going to wrap up this, session of the Riseup Radio. Stella and Solange both are available and very active on LinkedIn. You just need to hit them up, and they'll actively connect with you. So please do that. We're going to share their LinkedIn profiles in the description below. And there you have it. Future of work and AI. Opportunities are real, risks are real. We just need a lot of realignment and reimagination to look at productivity and use it in a more effective manner. And companies that are going to be successful are the ones who are going to proactively lead the change rather than get consumed by the ones who are making the change happen. Thank you, folks. Thank you both. It was lovely having you on the show today, and look forward to future collaborations as well. You take care.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Bye, folks. Take care.